So, hello, Beata. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Andrea.
And you're at the hospital?
No, I'm at home in the kitchen.
Ah, okay, yeah. I could tell you've got this painting behind you. Is that one of yours?
Yeah, that's one of mine.
Brilliant.
Good old days.
So how is Jan right now?
Since we last spoke, his condition has worsened in a sense that due to his oversensitivity to light, it's very difficult to give him food without getting any light touching his eyes. So there was one caregiver who had used too much light, and now it's only possible to give him like food in the box, which is, as you can imagine, quite a challenge. We have these like special cups with a hole as an ending, and I basically have to lift him up in the bed, put my left hand inside the box to feel with my left hand where his mouth is, and then go with the right hand with the cup to pour the content into his mouth. So it's quite a challenge. Yeah, it's quite a challenge. But eating is still working, knock on wood. So that was a major change, that we cannot even take the box off while he's eating. So things can get quite complicated. Plus the hospital wants us to leave, and we don't know yet where we go. So that's also another thing we have to find a solution for. Yeah.
So he literally is at the moment then 24/7 with the box over his head.
Yeah.
In that situation that he's been facing for a considerable time now, you know, you've mentioned his poetry, you've mentioned it a few times, and we just thought we would love to do a recording to express that poetry that he is sharing with the world. And he really would like to share it with the world. So this is what we're doing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You mentioned that Jan's father was inspired to write poetry based on Jan's condition. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Jan's father is an artist by nature. So his story is that he was working for theater. He did the stage design, and he can draw, he can paint, he can do all kinds of things. But he can also write poetry. And when Jan got into this condition, he got inspired to express himself in this way.
And you have a couple of Marx's, Jan's father's poems to read. Could you tell us a little bit about the poems, and then we'll listen to them?
One poem is about Jan's condition. It's called The Deep Sea Fish, Der Tiefseefisch, and it refers to the animals that live in the deep sea where there is no light at all. And some of them have created like a little lantern in front of them to enlighten their environment. So it's based on, this is a metaphor for Jan's condition. It's a deep sea fish. It's a beautiful poem.
Über, für meinen Sohn Jan, der Tiefseefisch. Am tiefsten Punkt des Meeres lebe ich nun, im dunklen Schwarz gefangen, von brennendem Druck umgeben. Mein Laternchen blinkt und beleuchtet nur wenige Zentimeter vor mir, dahinter nichts. Manchmal meine ich Lichtchen zu sehen, aber es sind wohl nur Funken in Stäbchen und Zäpfchen. Es ist so still hier. So still, dass es in meinen Ohren schreit. Mein Maul benutze ich schon seit langem nur noch zum Fressen, das wenige, was es hier gibt. Meine Schreie ersticken in dem dunkelschwarzen Druck, sodass nur noch ein Stöhnen übrig bleibt. Doch wäre alles noch zu ertragen, wenn nur dieser betäubende Gestank nicht wäre. Von all den Abfällen, die von oben auf den Grund rieseln. Der Gestank der Welt. Eines Tages aber werde ich auftauchen. Und mein Körper wird leichter und leichter werden und ich werde größer und größer werden, bis ich über dem Meeresspiegel schwebe und weithin in Regenbogenfarben zerplatzen werde wie eine Seifenblase.
And the other one, it's about his relationship with Jan. It's called You and I.
Du und ich. Als ich dich auf mich zukommen sah, strahlend lächelnd, voll Zuversicht und Selbstvertrauen, mich umarmtest, wurde dein Glück zu meinem Glück. Als ich dich dann straucheln sah und du ins Dunkle stürztest, ins Leid und Verzweiflung, wurde dein Unglück zu meinem. Lass uns nun gemeinsam Hand in Hand stolpern und straucheln, du und ich, auf dem Weg zurück ins Licht.
I would like to ask Jan's father a question as well about how he feels that his poetry is connected with Jan's poetry and how they reflect on each other.
This is a really difficult question for me to answer. There are statements that are hard for me to put into words. For example, I love you. Has become almost commonplace to its nearly inflationary use. It's so common. And for me it doesn't really convey the feeling I want to express. So I turn to poetry to say what I cannot say or put into words. It's like a paradox. Additionally, poetry is a way to better process emotions or inner thoughts, states that heavy on me in a creative manner, and perhaps you can see them in a different light, in a different perspective, by doing so reducing the pressure they cause within me, or even can dissolving unspoken fears, and it's possible to express the unexpressible and make the unbearable manageable and doable by viewing it from a new perspective.
What does that shared creative expression mean for the relationship?
I think this connects me also with Jan. That is, it is the same for him. He can look at his situation in a different way, in a creative way. And also, it's simply beautiful to write poetry, and it is satisfactory. Yes.
Thank you, Marcus, for those responses. It really helps us understand the wider impact on the family, but also your insights show how creativity can help people through all situations. So you're obviously a very creative family. You know, you've got your artwork behind you there. You've got Jan's father inspired to write poetry based on Jan's condition. But Jan's creativity, you know, when did you first notice Jan's creativity?
Very early. It was when he went to the kindergarten. He produced tons of artwork. He transformed everything into art, like huge paintings, drawings, little things, objects, and so on. So it started really early. And yeah, at school, he used to also do the artwork for others. So it has never stopped, basically. It got little, but with poetry, he has only started now.
How do you feel, or how do people feel around him, with that creative expression coming from such a challenging and confining space?
It was a process to get there. It started with first by getting more and more into this box. His illness also comes with oversensitivity of listening. So he cannot listen to digital recordings. In the beginning, we could read him books, but then this got less and less. And then he started with a bullet journal. We have already talked about that.
Mhm.
And then he started with its so-called Stoic journal, because he couldn't listen for too long. So we would read him like a quote by Seneca or Marcus Aurelius, then a little comment to it, and then he would think about this quote, and then in the end we would record his reflection about this quote.
The Daily Stoic Journal. What am I learning and studying for?
So currently I'm studying Stoicism, and that's an ancient Roman philosophy, and Taoism. And my main focus of learning about these philosophies is that they provide me with maps and anchors for specific situations. Especially Stoicism really helps with dark hours. So one of my favorites of Stoicism is don't complain. I have a tendency to complain about stuff, and to remember myself that Marcus Aurelius says that to himself too helps me to snap out of it. And yeah, so I'm collecting these maps, and this collection gives me freedom to see what's capable or what's possible, how to deal with hard situations, and also that the world of possibilities is really large, much larger than I thought possible.
What is my purpose in life?
So up to the point of getting sick, my purpose in life was to acquire mastery, to become really good at living life. And that was quite a self-centric kind of purpose, looking back. And now my purpose in life is getting back to health, to recover. And I intuit that my purpose in life, when I have recovered, is to help other people who are stuck in darkness, like I am now currently. I always get the image of a shepherd with like a wand, who stands in a golden circle and is like a beacon of light for those who are still stuck in darkness. And with darkness, I mean very concretely or specifically physical illness. So I want to, as I have studied psychology in university, I want to work with people with severe physical illness and help them see the light and possibility of healing and coping with their lot in life and leading them back into the light, so to speak. Yeah, and that arose from having forgotten the light for the past 2 years, 3 years, and only now finding my old footing again, my old self again, and at the same time finding myself completely anew.
This he was doing maybe 2 months, and then he started with one little poem, and maybe I can read this for you.
Yes.
It was the very first poem he was writing, and it's called Fragment of Light. Dear fragment of light, with this thread of love, let me guide you back to wholeness and completion. So that's the first one. It's only 5 lines, and he was writing it in English, and all the following pieces are written in German, and they got more and more complex. And with this artistic expression, something within himself opened up, because he connected back to this artistic expression he had before, and through this artistic expression he was able to communicate what he was experiencing in the box and get it out in a creative way. And since that day, it sort of has changed something in a way that he is now seeing some, he has an aim, he has some motivation to go on, and yeah, he has more power, I think. His way of communicating with the world is so confined, it's limited to such a very, very small space. And with the poetry, he can reach more and more people. At first, of course, we would not read it to anyone, but then he asked, "Oh, can you put it into our WhatsApp group with the people who are suffering severely?" Or it's the parents, basically, it's the caregivers, not the people themselves, because they cannot type or anything. Responses that some people have felt very touched by the content and by the depth of it. And then it is coming back to Jan, and he's even more motivated because he feels that it's not in vain he's doing it. So it can open people's hearts or reach people's hearts and express things that other people experience, but they don't know how to express themselves. So it can be read by people who are living this experience. It can be read by people who are the caregivers, because it's also obvious that they are involved as well. And it can be read by people who don't know anything about it and get to know it from an inside. And we got really...
That particular poem that you've just read, it's very deep and meaningful for anyone to read it, but knowing Jan's current situation, his confinement and his challenge in that space in the box, it adds such a profound, deep level of connection there. Really reaches the heart. So a question for Jan is, when you write your poetry, what do you hope people will feel or understand about your experience?
This is not on my mind at all when I think about a line or dictate something. I do it simply to express my truth in a creative way and to have fun while doing it. It's like creating colorful building blocks and building, a mosaic or a whole of different building blocks. That's my goal. A colorful something that comes together and forms one thing. and that is the representation of my experience. And yeah, I primarily do it for fun, and fun seems like the wrong word. It's deeply satisfying and purposeful, and that's why I'm doing it.
If you could use one word or image from your poetry to describe yourself, what would that word be and why?
I have a multitude of poems which I use to look at myself from different angles. One is a factory, which is run down. One is a solar system with me as the sun in the center. This is more for my social world. And I have mosaic. I don't know if the English term is the same one. The colorful glasses you find in churches, who consist of different fragments. And that poem itself is what I think about when I think about myself the most. So a mixture of darkness and light, some places where I'm a vessel for light, so to say, and some places where I'm stuck and energy is not flowing really well. My issues that I know symbolized as glass, which is dirty or broken. So yeah, excuse my broken English. And yeah, so I use the metaphor of the mosaic the most.
So when I asked Jan that we're doing the recording, I asked him because now he's on poem 15 now. And I asked him, which of the poems would you like me to read to the public of the poems you've already written? And he said, Entangled Connections would be one, or the Pulsar would be one, or the Mosaic. I will read it in German because the translation is not always 100%, so we have both of it.
Okay.
Okay. Das Mosaik. Wie ein Mosaik aus bunten Elementen besteht unsere Persönlichkeit aus Fragmenten. Ist eine Scherbe klar und rein, lässt sie viel Sonnenschein herein. Ist sie verdreckt oder zerfurcht, lässt sie diesen kaum hindurch. So bestehen wir alle aus Dunkelheit und Licht, das sich in vielen Facetten bricht. Auf der Suche nach mehr Energie wird Ganzheit ein zentrales Ziel. Um mich diesem anzunähern, muss ich meine Schatten klären. Sei es durch Kintsugi, Neuschliff oder Politur, viele Techniken wiedererwecken die leuchtende Natur. Persönlichkeit auf diese Weise zu verstehen, ermöglicht Heilung zu geschehen. Ganz konkret für mich gesprochen, ist eine rote Scheibe angebrochen. Der Moment, in dem dies geschah, war der, in dem ich meine Krankheit als unbewältigbar ansah. Sie symbolisiert den Kontakt zu meinem Körper, gestört durch eine Vielzahl ablenkender Wörter. Doch es gibt ein weiteres Fragment, das den Schein der Sonne hemmt und dessen Farbe man, eingetrübt, kaum mehr erkennt. Es ist der Blick nach draußen in diese schemenhaft vernebelte Welt im Außen. Diese Trübung begann wegen Anforderungsdruck in meiner Jugend und verschloss so manche Tugend. Der durch diese Scheiben verdunkelte Raum erinnert an das Zentrum meiner Weltanschauung. Heile deine emotionalen Wunden, dann wirst du auch körperlich gesunden. Mein Fokus weitet sich und ich blicke auf den strahlenden Rest des Mosaiks. Durch eine gelbe Scheibe blickend fühle ich Dankbarkeit einer reichhaltigen Erntezeit. Durch eine blaue Scheibe blickend fühle ich die Flexibilität von einem Fisch auf hoher See. Durch eine violette Scheibe blickend fühle ich mich erwacht aus einem Traum, wie ein Astronaut schwebend über Zeit und Raum. Der scheibenreine und erleuchtete Natur wirkt wie eine ausgleichende Kur. Zurückgezogen vor der Welt und in einem Körper, der zerfällt, gibt es so doch Farbigkeit, die das ganze Mosaik erhält. So.
Beautiful.
And why I like this poem so much is because there are so many colors that I see some different stained colored window or pieces of different colors, colored glass, where the light is coming in, and that's for me a metaphor for a person's transformation. Because when all the shards, when all the mosaic windows, when they're all free of dirt, of scratches, then the light of God can come in. But if it's really blurry and with dirt, no light can come in. So I love this metaphor because it's such a colorful range. It's such a colorful piece of art that you see and you hear, and this togetherness, it's one of my favorite poems.
It's beautiful.
Der Pulsar. It's about neutron star. It's like a star that could be imploding, and it's when Jan has his it's so-called dark hours, when he's in such severe crash state and pain and it's just unbearable, then he can be suicidal, that he thinks he just wants to press the exit button and leave. When he's recovering a little more, then he doesn't want to press the button again. But in these hours, he's hitting this this moment where he just doesn't want to exit. And this is caught in the pulsar, this thought that you just want to exit. But it ends with hope and that he doesn't want to exit, so I just read. Okay. Der Pulsar. Hier stehe ich als zerfallender Pulsar, meiner Implosion so schrecklich nah. Doch anstatt quälend langsam zuzusehen, wie meine Brennstoffreserven zur Neige gehen, will ich mir das Leben nehmen. Denn ich fürchte nicht das schwarze Loch, sondern den Fortbestand von meinem Joch. Das Einzige, was mich hier noch hält, sind die Planeten meiner Welt. In meiner Supernova zu verglimmen, dieser Gedanke holt mich zurück zu meinen Sinnen. Ich schaue in Richtung des weiten Nichts und erblicke dort die planetaren Reflexionen meines Lichts. So bleibe ich bestehen und entschließe mich, nicht aufzugeben. So, yeah, it's also about the other planets that could be metaphoric for relations, for the loved ones, that keep him back to go. So it's a very deep poem, which I think with this metaphor of this imploding star is mirroring the condition he's in and still mirroring where he's going through, but still keeping that hope that it could end it could still go in another direction.
So this poem really shows how Jan's inner world is bridged through his poetry to the outer world and to those people who are connecting with him and caring for him.
Yeah, this image of a rotating neutron star that could be imploding is like really mirroring this existential crisis he's in and the feeling of collapse or implosion, this loss of stability he's experiencing. And particularly this fear of this ongoing suffering that, I mean, it's not fear of death, but of this ongoing condition of suffering. Yeah. But there are also others. This is, yeah, the ones maybe that is not so easy to listen to. There is another one. It's called Entangled Connections, which shows like the duality between the self that is known and the person that is ill. So the person that is lying in bed, is it now still the old self, this known self, or is it only a person that is really ill, and which one is it? So this is the sense of this poem that I could read now. Verstrickte Verbindungen. Beziehungen, scheinbar sicher verbunden, verändern sich in der Zeit im Dunkeln. Überreizt und sensitiv steht jede Dynamik plötzlich schief. Behandelt wie ein rohes Ei, bricht jede Normalität entzwei. Denn im Versuch zu schonen, wird Krankheit zum Mittelpunkt erhoben. Diesen unsichtbaren Elefanten schieben wir in eine Ecke des Verstandes. Wir handeln annähernd normal, als wäre mein Zustand nicht real. In diesem dynamischen Konflikt wird unsere Verbindung schnell verstrickt. Bin ich nun der Altbekannte oder doch der Kranke? Gilt die Wahl dem Ersteren, steigt der Druck im Inneren. Durch diesen angestauten Schmerz verschließe ich mein Herz. Ist Letzteres die Wahl, teile ich Stückchen meiner Qual. Doch schluchzend, weinend merke ich, wie mein Gefühl von Würde bricht. Also realisiere ich bin sowohl der Kranke als auch der Altbekannte. Werde ich dann ganzheitlich gesehen, spüre ich mein Herz aufgehen.
He's really sharing his position and his experience with the listener.
He's going in depth, and it's him. He expresses himself, and when he's creating a poem and looking how to put it right, he has a very strict sense of what he wants and what he doesn't. So it's all by him. It's not by anyone else. If we say, oh, it could better sound like this, no, it's like this. So it's,
good for
it's
him.
completely his creation.
Well, they're very deep and meaningful poems. They're something that really connects with his experience. And for me, listening to those poems, you know, it really draws you into his experience. But you can't share the pain and the suffering. You can only imagine that pain and the suffering. I'm wondering, when he's inspired to write this poetry, does it help him lift out and focus away from that, like focus away from his current situation, and help him therefore realize he still has himself in the purest state, that he's not his experience, it is not his pain and suffering. He's still there, he's still present, and he's still expressing aside from that.
So there are like different modes of dictating my poetry. I myself can't write, so I have to keep a lot of stuff in my mind and tell it to my mom or dad. And sometimes it's a grind and it's not very pleasant and I get lost in it. Other times I get into something akin to a flow state, and in that state I'm more the watcher of the clouds, or letting the birds come, and I'm simply saying yes to whatever comes up, or no, mostly yes. But especially when I'm listening to my poetry, either when I know it by heart and recite it to myself, or when my father or mother is reading them to me, then I get into a state of freedom from the experience where I can look at what I'm experiencing from afar and am almost entirely the witness.
How often does Jan write his poetry? Is he? I mean, you say he's written 15 in the past month, is it?
He wrote this little poem that I read before, and then many weeks nothing. When it really kicked in was in December, and now he's writing every day, basically one day a poem. Yeah, so, or maybe 2 days one. So because it needs, first he's writing the poem, then the second phase is to go over it again and write a second, sometimes a third version of it, to polish it and so on. Because the more complex they get, the more they need to be polished and a little bit changed. So from one poem we have at least 4 versions. So until the final version he's happy with. And this takes normally 2 days.
So he speaks it out maybe line by line as it comes to him, and then somebody writes it out.
I think he says, oh, let's go back to poem number 13. I want to change the so-and-so line from this. So he knows everything by heart, or he sees it in front of his inner eye. I mean, he has a memory. It's incredible what he can remember.
That actually would be really interesting to know from Jan. Is this like a photographic memory of his poems? How does he remember them?
I don't know.
That would be a great question to ask him. How does he remember them so deeply so that he can go back to them and change them as and when he feels there's a word to change? Or
yeah, memorizing my poems is something that's fun to me, at least ones I like. So I don't memorize all of them, but about half. And that's only possible because of the rhymes. And the shorter ones are obviously easier. And yeah, I simply recite them once a day or so. And because it's imbued with meaning and I actually like the poems, it's quite easy to do. It comes natural. Yeah. I want to emphasize that I don't have like a special memorization capacity or something, like a photographic memory for the poems or something. I think before people wrote, they also had these epic poems, which also rhymed and helped them remember them. And I think it's similar to that. If you don't have any writings, you have to memorize them. And the necessity alone, you don't have a choice, is a powerful force for the mind to keep the stuff in your head. For books, I use when I memorize books, like the Tao Te Ching, a current project, I use something akin to a memory palace, where I walk along a road and meet different characters who symbolize different passages in the Tao Te Ching. So, for example, I meet a pair of twins, and one of them has lepra, and that reminds me, the Tao Te Ching says that when people say something is beautiful, other things become ugly. And then I'm reminded of that quote, and I go along the road. So there are tricks to help the mind remember stuff, but yeah, for the poems, it's just because it's fun and it rhymes. Yeah.
And how is it with his audio sensitivity when you're reading them back to him, or somebody's reading them back to him? Manages with that?
Yeah, I mean, one day is not like another. On one day he can accept more. On another day, nothing is possible at all. So it comes and goes, his ability to listen. But usually he can work on a poem for maybe 1 or 2 hours, always with breaks in between, of course. But it's just coming out like this, so.
And what's his aspirations for his poetry? He's obviously prolifically writing from the creative space that he has now. What would he like to do with his poetry?
His aim is, strange enough, he said his aim is to write at least 60 poems. So now we are at number 15, and he thinks about even publishing it. So we wait and see. His aim is to have a book published, like a 3D book, not only digital version, but a real book.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, let's help in making that happen. That would be great.
And another aspect is that he has such strong sleep difficulty. So some nights he sleeps only 2 hours, other nights 4, 5. 5 is already a lot. And so he's lying awake for quite a long time. And I think he's using this time as well to already think about it. And
so how does he when he starts formulating a poem in his mind, it starts coming, does he kind of go, oh, there's a poem coming, it's here, can I record it with you, can you write this for me? Or how does that process work?
it was like that there was something he wanted to express, and then the poem was there. And now he's approaching it in a more structured way. So because the poems get more and more complex, he decides which subject he wants to write a poem about. And then he's doing like a structure of different phases. And these different phases, then they come just like a flow. But first he's like deciding which subject he wants to write upon, then which structure, how can you divide the subject into different pieces, and then piece by piece, it's just coming out like that. It's more or less like this.
And he always has somebody by his side who can write and record whenever he needs that.
During the day, yes, but during the night, no. So.
And does Jan have any idea of day and night? Because when he has this box and to remove his light sensitivity, or remove the light because of his sensitivity, does he know if it's daytime or nighttime often?
He knows, because he knows it from the rhythm that his caregivers come in. Because we usually come in at 9 and we leave around 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And in the meantime, he's alone. So you can imagine he sleeps 2 to 4 hours. So he's still 8 hours on his own. And that's a long time. And he can, I think his structure is that the caregiver is coming and going. So he can feel what is nighttime and what isn't.
Jan spends a lot of time with sensory deprivation. He spends a lot of that time with his creative spirit, expressing himself with analogies, metaphors, in such an articulate way that really draws the listener in. And that painting behind you, looking at your creativity and this brilliant, amazing family that you have, what's that meaning of that image, the painting that you have behind you?
It's very difficult for me to say which meaning a painting has, because then it's too obvious. So I usually like people to discover by themselves.
So is there anything else you'd like to include in this recording before we end?
Listeners who are wanting to get a copy of Jan's book that will maybe be published, I don't know when, where can they find the information?
Well, we put a link at the bottom of the video, and we'll link that to where they can find the information, connect with us somehow, or connect with the published book. We'll direct them that. Yeah.
And I mean, with this video, we want to encourage people to express themselves, because there is like a real liberation, a liberating factor, whether it's with a bullet journal or with daily reflections or with any artistic expression. Of course, Jan cannot paint or draw, or it's very limited, but poetry, it's one way to express yourself.
Yeah, and he's really shining through with that poetry. So absolutely, if there's anybody out there in a similar position to Jan and wishes to express themselves, please get in touch. You know, we can add it to this space, which would be absolutely wonderful.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Beata. It's been inspiring listening to you, and Jan's poetry is just, it's beautiful.
Nachhaltige.
Eine nachhaltige Transformation.
So geschieht dies im Netzwerk.
So geschieht dies im Netzwerk
Der Ebene über mir.